In March 2022, a trend started on TikTok, hashtag quiet quitting. It's a trend of doing the minimum requirements of one's job and putting in no more time, effort, or enthusiasm than necessary. This hashtag has been viewed almost 400 million times since then, and the mainstream media has covered it quite favorably. People love the idea, and why wouldn't they? Not going above and beyond for companies that don't treat you right? Count me in. After the pandemic, there has been an acute shortage of labor, especially in developed economies, as a lot of people are choosing not to go back to work. Companies are desperate to hire new employees and have been offering very competitive salaries and signing bonuses. Companies can fire their employees, and that's why trends like hashtag quiet quitting are possible, without the manager yelling, "You are fired!" But there is a problem. Higher salaries and more power to the people sound like a good thing. Politicians also constantly say it's a win for the small guy. But this is not so simple. You see, businesses are there to maximize profits, and they will do anything to do so. While in the short run, they might play along and give employees what they want. They will always try to find a convenient and more profitable alternative in the future. And automation is most likely the alternative. Automation is here, and it might be coming for your jobs. Machines don't get sick, don't go on strike, and can work 24/7 and don't need to be maintained like humans. While a few years ago, it was limited to mundane and repetitive jobs, it has gotten much smarter. From a chatbot that can completely understand what you are saying and can give answers to open-ended questions, to an AI that can code you an entire game, it's starting to take over. And you might want to pay attention to it. So, what would happen if artificial intelligence takes over all our jobs? Will we be in a utopian world where we don't need to work if we don't want and all our basic needs are fulfilled? Or will we be in a dystopian world where people die from starvation and the wealth inequality will be huge? Maybe neither. That's what we are here to explore in this video. But before we do that, tap the like button before the robots come for that too. Before we talk about what the automation economy could look like in the future, we need to look at how it was speculated in the past and what happened. If you are a history nerd, you know that talk about machines taking over is not new. The earliest known references to such fears date back to the 1920s, and it has been there ever since. On February 26, 1928, a headline in the New York Times announced, "March of the Machine Makes Idle Hands." The fears again spiked in the early 1960s, and JFK declared automation as one of the biggest threats to employment. However, if you look at the job market today, there is no mass unemployment. People are not desperate for jobs, and machines have not taken over. The employment rates on average are one of the highest ever. So what happened? Automation destroyed some jobs but replaced them with new jobs. For example, the introduction of automated teller machines or ATMs led to the loss of jobs for bank tellers, but it also created new jobs in fields such as IT and software development for the individuals and companies responsible for designing, building, and maintaining ATMs. Sure, employees have to learn new skills or even increase their level of skills, but people have not been completely obsolete. So, is it the same this time? Will new jobs be created out of automation? Well, no. This time, it's different. You see, every time we have increased the role of automation, jobs related to running and maintaining that automated process has been created. In the ATM example, jobs were created for building and running the ATM system. But this time, automation is aiming to automate everything, from coding the entire ATM system to running and maintaining it. Humans would not be needed at any step of the way. What if you could buy machines that are capable of running an entire company by themselves? From building your website, dealing with suppliers, marketing, emailing potential clients, answering their complex queries, and delivering the product to them in a self-driving truck. What if machines could do it all? We are much closer to this than you think. Recently, a company named OpenAI released a chatbot called ChatGPT. Now, if you have any experience with chatbots, you know they are terrible. However, ChatGPT is on a whole different level. While traditional chatbots could only answer very specific close-ended questions, ChatGPT can virtually answer every open-ended question you can think of. Imagine talking to a chatbot of your bank and it's so good you can even differentiate between a human and a bot. Imagine being able to create entire websites without knowledge of coding. Imagine letting a bot do all your complex math equations. ChatGPT can do it all. A few years ago, IT seemed like a future-proof job, but judging from the recent developments, it looks like shortly, AI can do a lot of work done by IT professionals. Combine this with the learning curves of AI and it learns faster and faster every time. Full automation is no longer a distant future. It's much closer. So what would the world look like if machines become the best option for every possible job and we become obsolete? Well, there are a few ways to look at this. When talking about a future with AI taking over our jobs, a few scenarios might be possible. One of the optimistic but unlikely outcome is that AI machines do all our boring work and we don't have to work if we don't want to. Our basic needs are fulfilled and we could just do what we want. How would we even fund something like this? Well, there are a lot of ideas, but nowadays, something called the universal basic income is getting popular. Its basic idea is to give everyone a fixed amount of money regularly, no questions asked. It isn't as radical as it sounds. If AI does take our jobs, this could potentially stop social unrest and chaos in the future. Countries like Finland have already carried out small-scale experiments with UBI and the results are promising. Participants showed improvements in mental well-being, anxiety, and creativity. However, we are still in the early stages and need a lot more experiments to arrive at a reasonable conclusion. If everything works and UBI is adopted in this future world, this is how the economy would work. The government would provide a fixed check to everyone regardless of whether they work or not. This payment would be enough for a decent standard of living, and having a job would be a necessity. The government would fund these payments by taxing the companies that own these AI machines and produce all the goods and services. People who still want to work could choose to work in a few places that have not been automated yet. These people will most likely create the upper middle class. Will this idea work? Well, yeah, it could work. Everyone benefits here. No one is struggling to make ends meet and people can do whatever they want. This sense of security creates a stable society. It would also be in the interest of these companies to keep it that way. Because an unhappy population and angry public is usually the reason behind every revolution. Even if you keep this aside, it makes economic sense to do this and not to have extreme wealth inequality. You see, billionaire having $2 billion and a million people having $2,000 each are very different things in terms of how much money is likely to be spent. An economy functions better when people are spending more money. More money spent means more goods and services are being sold and the economic machine is running smoothly. If that's clear, let us talk about something called the marginal propensity to consume. Let's say there are two scenarios. In one case, a person gets $2 billion and in another case, 1 million people get $2,000 each. The person who receives $1 billion isn't likely to spend a big chunk of that money. There are only so many things people can buy. Let's say after everything is spent, 200 million or 10% and save $1.8 billion. In another scenario, let's say everyone spent $1,200 and saved $800. If a million people did that, they would spend roughly $1.2 billion. And all of a sudden, the same $2 billion was spent in a very different way. The first one only added $200 million to the economy, while the second one added $1.2 billion. Businesses also need consumers for their products. If people are not earning money, who will buy their products? No one. However, you might have already seen some flaws here. Only small experiments have been carried out regarding UBI and it's still in the early phase. A lot of things can go wrong when trying such an experiment on a larger scale. Even if the UBI model works perfectly in a society where people have no goals, aims, and motivation to achieve anything, won't people be depressed? Will they have any purpose in life or are they just lost? 2020 has given us a good understanding of what would happen if people don't work for a long time. An idle mind is perfect for anxiety, depression, and loneliness. This world could also create an overpopulation problem. In most developed countries these days, raising a child is expensive, and people are very careful with how many children they want. Questions about whether they can afford to have more children and whether they are willing to compromise their careers in the process are on everyone's mind. This is why we have seen a gradual decline in the population of most developed countries. However, if you remove this economic worry and give people the freedom to have as many babies, the population is going to explode. This would further get worse by UBI, as parents are more incentivized to raise children for those UBI checks. So in this scenario, things aren't looking utopian. However, there could be much worse outcomes as we discuss later in the video. Another more optimistic outcome for the future with automation is coexisting with machines. Imagine a world where every person is as smart or smarter than Einstein. What could we achieve? How would our world change? How would that happen? By combining the computer's brain with ours. This sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie, but if you take a closer look, it is the one we are closest to. Companies like Neuralink are already planning to implant a microchip inside people's brains to make them smarter. Currently, it's working on implanting a chip in a paralyzed people, but this is just the beginning. Imagine if you go to Spain and just download the language, maps, local places, and a lot more directly into your brain. Or perform complex calculus in your head. The possibilities are endless, and this future is the one I am most excited and hopeful about. Minus all the Matrix AI taking over the human scenario. We could coexist and function at the same level so we would not be obsolete. However, it is much more likely the future of automation will be a dystopian nightmare. The positive outcomes are just hopes, and there are so many things that can go wrong. So what would the world look like? In this outcome, society will be divided into contrasting parts, the haves and the have-nots. As AI take over more and more jobs, there will be fewer and fewer opportunities for human workers. This will lead to widespread job loss and unemployment, with potentially devastating consequences for the economy and society as a whole. Even those workers who can find employment in the age of artificial intelligence may not be as secure as they once were. As AI machines become increasingly capable, they will be able to perform tasks more efficiently and at a lower cost than humans. This could lead to a shift towards a gig economy, where workers are hired on a temporary or project-by-project basis, rather than being given stable long-term employment. This is just the beginning. After a while, even people in this gig economy will be replaced by AI, and there will be virtually no jobs. Surely, there will be a universal basic income, but it will be the bare minimum, just enough to keep you alive so you won't think about revolting. Wealth inequality will be extreme, and the rich people will control all the machinery that produces goods and services. What we see in dystopian future movies might come true. In this situation, the rich people will constantly be in the fear of a revolution. You see, a revolution always starts when people are very unhappy with the system and there is misery and anger everywhere. We could also see complete anarchy play out where people are valued solely based on what they can provide economically. There would be no government, no UBI, and no regulation of any kind. A lot of people who cannot provide any economic value will simply starve and die. There will be mass famine, and people who can provide economic value will climb the economic ladder. Maybe a real-life Hunger Games. Who knows? No one can predict the future. Past speculations about how our world would look have always been hilariously bad. For instance, in the 1960s, the consensus was that we would have flying cars and have reached Mars by 2000. However, we can speculate based on logic and reasonable facts. No matter how our world looks like post-automation, it is coming, and this time it's different from before. Even jobs related to these machines are going to be replaced, and the need for human workers is going to be reduced by a lot. It's just a question of how the world would look after this. A utopia where people's basic needs are fulfilled and they don't have to work if they don't want to, or a dystopia where people have a hard time even comprehend yet. So, what do you think our future will look like under full automation? Do you think it's going to be one of the options we discussed, or will it be something completely different? Comment that down below, and don't forget to subscribe for future videos like this.